It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello friends, I am Rob and this is my State of the Dungeon address. This is for the game that took place on the 10th of June, 2021. The game was The Princess Bride, the role-playing game, and fortunately all players were in attendance. We started the action in the middle of action when the player's ship had been grappled and boarded by pirates on the Great Lake of the nation of Florin. The pirates had already made it pretty clear that they were going to take everything on the boat. Players didn't care all that much because it wasn't their boat. And apparently these things happen. So, for the most part, everything was hunky-dory and it would just be easily resolved with a quick transferal of all the valuables on the ship to the pirates. But, as fortune would have it, or I would have it, the player of the agent decided that he was going to go onto the ship and talk to the captain of the pirate ship, Lady Maybelle. Lady Maybelle is a giantess. She is 7 foot tall. She has a large sword. She is a statuesque Teutonic warrior woman. Not terribly unattractive either, but she has these men under her heel. So when Manfredi met with her, it was basically as, subservient. It's like, all right, I'll do what you want. And she seemed pretty happy with his response, but then her men told her about Bonk. And that Bonk is 6'8" plus and plenty strong and strapping, and she got excited. She called for her dating clubs, which are a pair of iron-tipped clubs. And she went to the character's ship. They saw her from over the side, and she's enormous. And then she lands down on their deck with a thump. And she doesn't pay any attention to anyone other than Bonk. She has eyes only for him. She throws him the club and asks if he knows how to use it. And he does, fairly. But he's no master. She's a bit more skilled than he is, and they're a dead match for size and power. So it's going to very much come down to letting Bonk have a taste for, trying to do the best he can. And it started off with Bonk attempting to attack her and rolling poorly. I'm happy to say that the rolling futility of the prior session did not apply in this one, although there were still some failures and there were still some successes. I admit I one time had my doubts about the fudge dice system, giving you a swing of +4 or -4, but mostly on a bell curve. No, those swings are pretty profound, actually, as it turns out. So he tries hitting her. She thumps him a good one. It's not looking so good, but interestingly enough, he wasn't the only person that was involved. The rest of the group was still around trying to figure out how they were going to do something. Mostly they were trying to shout encouragement. It really boiled down to, for almost the entirety of the fight, Renoir Lefez, the fencer of the group, was shouting encouragements, which worked pretty well. He actually did help to inspire Bonk once. Manfredi also attempted to give tactical advice, but his manner of doing so was to call the pirate queen some names that her crew did not appreciate. So they pulled out daggers and prepared to gut him. However, Manfredi is very skilled with daggers himself, and he dodged out of the way, leaving the pirates, who aren't the best Dirksmen, to stab each other by rolling fantastically. So he's alright, but he scampers across the deck to get next to Renoir and One-Eyed Pete the pirate. Now, Pete is enjoying this because he's watching pirates doing what pirates can do, brawling. And, he might even like Bonk a little bit, but they're just acquaintances, so he wasn't going to get involved. Plus, he's surrounded by their pirates, which means he knows how precarious his situation can be. He's a great swordsman and plenty strong, but even he can't take on an entire crew by himself, especially when they've got bows prepared to do, if anybody tries to interfere. So he kind of knew his place. At that point, Arnor attempted to distract the pirates around the fight. First of all, tried to engage them in a little gambling, which she got some pretty good odds in gambling. And Josie tried to schmooze with the pirates, but she's not a pirate. And they knew she was just a poser, so they threw her overboard. She rolled particularly poorly. So, Bonk is not doing great at this, but what he does manage to succeed, he's not a great quarterstaffman, not great with a club, but he's a great grappler. So he manages to grab one of her arms and pin the arm up against him so that she can't get free range to hit him at any angle. And his skills are just good enough that he's deflecting her strikes against him. Until she comes up and she knees him full in what is a fairly obvious target whenever men get into a fight. So at this point he's not feeling great after she successfully knee-struck him below the belt. But he did manage to stun her for a second by kissing her, which he was not expecting. And then he took her to the ground in a leg sweep while still holding her, which kind of looked like a deep dip. So the fight is going interestingly. I'm not sure he intended all of this, but it was pretty good. And she tried whacking him in the head, and he blocked it with a club, still maintaining contact. And eventually she throws him off because she's not used to having, somebody on top of her matching her strength for strength. And wrestling isn't as much of a forte for her as clubbing people is. So they separate. And at this point, the rest of the group is really struggling to figure out ways to help out. Arnor eventually figures out that distracting the other pirates who are cheering for her might be a good idea. So Arnor goes to the loot that the pirates were taking off and takes the sack of coins, all of the shiny gold florins that they had looted from the noble, and she cast them onto the deck in front of the pirates. That was a great distraction, and caused them to, mill and root amongst themselves and pay less attention to the actual fight that was going on. And a lot of the other pirates were also distracted by the shiny coin. Manfredi finally came up with an idea. He wanted to interfere, but he couldn't think of any way that wasn't going to get him knifed, until he realized that the sun was actually out between the two ships. It was past their ship. So what he calculated was that if he got onto the pirate ship, he could reflect that light down into the fight and maybe get it into the pirate queen's eyes. He got up, found out that the ship itself was really only watched over by the cook, a crazy old man who had climbed up from the lower decks and was pretending to pilot the ship with lots of vroom vroom noises. So he wasn't too worried about him. He found this large gold platter on the deck, and he picked it up, and it was perfect to use it to shine into the pirate queen's eyes. Now, Bonk at this time had managed to land one blow against her leg to kind of soften her up a bit. But it was with his club, and he hit pretty well. So that was well struck, and she found herself kind of on the losing side a bit. And this was when One-Eyed Pete saw his opportunity, his golden moment. His faithful rat Billy would have his day in the sun, or out of the sun as the case was, as he expertly hurled it down into the armor of Lady Maybelle, where he rooted down in there. Now, she was not thrilled with this. Not that she was squicked out by having a rat touching her, but nobody likes to have a mangy rat milling about in their clothes. If you can imagine Mickey and the Beanstalk, where Mickey is running around in the giant's clothes, it's kind of like that. So in the middle of this fight, she's kind of bent over, reaching into her leather jerkin, which she has kind of loosened so she can get in there, trying to grab this rat that is running desperately to avoid her grip. And she's limping on her leg, and she's bent over trying to get it. Bonk seizes the opportunity, moves up, and again, not going to hit her, but he moves up and grabs her by the hips and puts her head between his legs and lifts up for a pile driver. Classic wrestling technique. And he lands it. Unfortunately, the damage was less than inspiring. Victimized by poor six-sided dice rolls. So the deck shuddered with the impact, but she didn't look like she was all that affected. And at this point, again, the rest of the group were like really struggling on how they were going to help. Renoir at this point had kicked her club out of her hands, which she had lost in the fracas. So he kicked it across the deck where she couldn't get at it, and then went looking like he was going after coins while still trying to maintain the club out of her reach. As she got up, those weird things happened. The player of the agent, no longer content with just shining light in her eyes, took the platter and flung it at her, Captain America shield style. And he hit. Okay, and he rolled damage. 6, 6, 6! Maximum damage! With that blow to the leg, he knocked her out. It was insanely good shot. And just caught her right alongside of the jaw. Boom, boom, and she drops. And because he rolled so well, I mean, he's legendary. The thing came right back to him, Captain America shield style. And because he didn't want those pirates thinking he attacked her, he deflected it to the cook. Again, these are the kind of things you can really only do with one of these fun narrative games. So the cook ended up getting thrown overboard for doing this, and he came away smelling like roses. And Bonk had won the day. So, the major domo for Lady Maybelle, who of course they made sure that she wasn't going to be attacked while she was down, arranged for her to be brought back and told Bonk, "Oh, congratulations, and I'm very pleased for your engagement." What? Oh yes, you won, so therefore the lady's hand is yours. So don't worry, we'll arrange for the wedding and everything. It'll be very nice. We'll come and get you when it's time. Bonk's character is an interesting and simple soul. But the player, I'm pretty sure, has never had a character married before. And I don't think he was quite ready for that, which is great. She did call them her dating clubs, and now they're her wedding clubs. He got to keep his club, by the way. It's a nice weapon. But Wicked Bill, the major domo, is like, "Oh, don't worry, it'll all be fabulous. You get half of the treasure hoard, of course, and all of the things that we were going to take are now yours. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you." So the pirates departed to take care of their arrangements, to wake up the lady and to figure out how they're going to get married. The group was allowed to continue on their way across the lake, unmolested. They finally got to the barony. Now at this point, I gave them lots of opportunities to go off, explore, do things on their own. They got to the barony and they found out that this place looked creepy. It was all but abandoned. There was a mist, and there's a hill that the castle is built on top of that is facing out to the water of the lake. All of the buildings were dark, locked, with a sign on them that they realized it was supposed to ward off plague. The entire town looked like it had been completely shut down, with only occasional guards with lanterns passing through the streets. The characters were a little nonplussed by this, but they got everything in order. They found Miracle Max, who had boarded himself up in the galley of the ship, and he had pilfered it pretty well of anything that he would need. So they went out onto the docks. They managed to land successfully without any great trauma, which was good, and entered into the town. Max wanted them to get a wagon, which they found a simple cart, and Bonk pulled it, which was fine. He didn't mind that. And they went basically through the town without getting molested by any guards or anything of the like. Eventually they got up to the gates, and they were met, and because Miracle Max was with them, they were welcomed inside. The guard was a little surly at first, but his peers realized that Miracle Max was important to the Baron, so they better get him in. So they did. Now again, most of the party was there and just basically being in character of Max's staff. Except for Manfredi. Manfredi decided he was going to go stealthy, because he didn't want to be eyeballs on him, and he rolled stealth. He slipped away and basically entered Batman mode. He rolled beyond legendary in skill, so he was nigh unseeable. He spent the rest of the session, as long as he wanted to, up in the gantries looking down at everything and seamlessly passing, without anybody noticing him. He became nigh intangible, seeing everything. It was fun. So the group basically got in without too much difficulty. They were basically led to the royal quarters, where they were kind of told what was going on. Apparently there's a Spanish witch named Montoya who's been taken on as kind of a counselor to the Baron. The Baron's eldest son is wasting away from what appears to be a plague or a disease, but nobody else is getting this plague. And he is bedridden and very, very seldom conscious enough to say or do much. Also, several other young men in the village are also in the same predicament. And this Montoya is assuring them that she can keep him alive. So, immediate distrust forms. And Max and one other are allowed in. Arnor is chosen from the group to go in and see the situation, because Arnor is a more worldly person, has a variety of more social skills than the others do. So, she goes in. They meet the Baron, who is basically sick with worry over his son. His son is a shriveled husk of himself, buried under blankets and kept alive on chicken broth, basically. They see the witch, who is mumbling some mantra and massaging his temples for the son. The Baron approaches them, is glad to see Miracle Max. Max immediately glares at the witch. They try to get a private viewing, but the Baron cannot kick out Montoya, insisting that she is allowed to stay because her presence seems to soothe his son and keep him on this side of death. So Max calls for an investigation. He pulls off some of the bedclothes to take a look at him, and they see that he is very pale. He is wasted away and atrophied from lack of vigorous exercise. And Max begins doing what ministrations he can to start with. Arnor, on the other hand, really doesn't have a lot of things that Arnor can do. So he does note that the witch has escaped the room without opening the door. Pretty creepy, but Max just accepts their secret doors all over in a castle like this, so it's not that big of a deal. They find their quarters, which are nice. There are different rooms in a suite that have been given over to Miracle Max, and they actually open up another one because they don't have guests at this time. So the group all has a place that they can stay and rest, which they seem to be pretty happy about. But Max tells Arnor, be nice if you could look around, see if you can find any information out about what's going on here, in the town in general, too. So they do. First of all, they have a nice meeting with... The Baron eventually leaves, and he is escorted to his bedchambers by his niece, who is just a little 7-year-old girl. She's bright and sparkly and nice, but she's sad at what's happening to her cousin. She eventually comes out, and under watch of the guard, they don't do anything to her, but they ask her some questions, and she gives them some information. Pretty good information. Turns out 7-year-olds can note a lot of what's going around that others might miss. And she told them that her cousin had slipped off with some friends. Now, the baronet is not some stuffy noble. He likes going out and hunting, and he likes, riding and even jousting, which has kind of fallen out of fashion at this point. But he's also made friends with some of the common folk, the sons of the businessmen and craftsmen of the town. And they have a club that they do meet from time to time. And she knew that. And she told them that all the men who had been affected by this plague are all members of his little group. So, this seemed suspicious. The group determined that they were going to go out and they were going to stake out these places and investigate and try to find out what's going on. So they do so. They all leave, again, having talked amongst each other about this plan. They decide to go out as a group. The first place they go to is a cobbler's, and they examine the building. 2-story. There's an open window because one of the mandates Montoya said is that the window must be open so that the victims can breathe in the night air, which is supposedly good for them. The group was immediately suspicious of this, of course. And they could see the open window above. Examining the area, even looking into the window, because Bonk just can lift a person up there, they looked around, and one thing they noticed is that below the window there is a vegetable garden, herb garden, whatever, and that there were footprints inside of it. Some small figure had crept up to the wall, and from the muddy scrape on the wall had climbed the wall here. So that's interesting. Now they know that there's a child in play, or somebody small. So they investigated. They found a coin from Gilder was actually wedged in between some cobbles. That's not entirely uncommon. They are neighbors, and there are merchants from Gilder who do come to Florin, but it's not that common, so could be suspicious. So they then next decided they were going to go to the next young man's residence, who was a baker. A bit more substantial place. The window that's open is not facing a wall that can easily be climbed, but after a little investigation, they determined that either somebody could heroically scale up a water pipe and climb arm over arm to the window, but the far easier way is to go to an adjoining building, climb up the porch onto the roof, leap onto the roof, and come down from the roof into the window. This again, Manfredi is really good at figuring out the sneaky way somebody might do something. His skill set has proven useful. They also didn't find any evidence that anybody had visited this place, and they thought that this is something that has to happen fairly regularly, so they decided that this was going to be where they would stake out. Another thing they noticed is that there was a flickering light in the window, which there hadn't been a light almost anywhere else in town, even ones that hadn't been affected by the plague. So they kind of looked in and they saw that there was a woman, rather young, somewhat pretty, who was reading from a book by candlelight in the room. They didn't disturb her. They looked around in all other aspects and couldn't really see anything telling, so they had every bit of hope that this place had not been visited by the assailant, which they were pretty sure it had. There was some mischief going on at this point. So the group decided they were going to hide and stake out. One-Eyed Pete's method of hiding was in plain sight. He was going to pretend to be a wino. He tippled a little bit of grog, spilled a little on himself for color, and just kind of slumped. The rest of the group kind of broke off on their own. Renoir, realizing that he is rubbish at stealth, decided to go an entire block down, which put him in danger of not being there when the group needs him. It's going to take him 2 actions to get into play. But it does stop his terrible, terrible stealth rules from impacting the rest of the group. The others managed to hide with varying degrees of success, but nobody has a really disastrous attempt at hiding. But because his method is pretty solid and he's got great powers of observation, One-Eyed Pete eventually heard, "Ah, the cow is finally asleep. now's my chance. And this was when the light went out up in the room above. They see a small figure slip through the shadows over to the porch that they had been keeping an eye on. At this point, Pete let the bottle roll and make a clatter that Arnor picked up right away with his observation skills. And he went over to investigate, and Pete's like, there he is. Now, the figure is small, but hunched. They found that the witch, Montoya, actually has a servant who is a hunchback and a dwarf. So, yeah, the group decides this is the time we should act. So, at this point, Manfredi decides I need to attack him. Bonk! Throw me at him. Okay. Bonk didn't know where this figure was, but he pointed over towards the porch, so Bonk just grabbed him by an arm, grabbed him by a leg, whirled him around, and launched him. Not well. Not very well at all. The human body isn't made for throwing, so he flew, and he hit the wall with a splat. At this point, though, this clued everybody in that something was going on. So, including the hunchback. So, now the hunchback's on top of the porch. He's got the group looking in that general vicinity, even if they haven't seen him yet in some cases. And he now knows that they are onto him. So, that's where we'll pick up next time. Thanks for joining me. I'm Rob. This has been quite the ride. Hopefully you are ready for the conclusion of a thrilling tale of romance, daring do, excitement, action, and adventure with our next installment of The Princess Bride, the role-playing game. Thank you and farewell.